So welcome to the Node.js Next 10 meeting for the 8th of December 2021. We'll follow the agenda in the issue that we had in the repo, which was issue number 105. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share?
No.
Okay, if people could add themselves here, I'm pasting the link into the chat. People could add themselves to the attendees, that would be great. And then we'll move on to the agenda. And I think also maybe not on the agenda, but we should talk a little bit about the debrief from the summit and kind of next steps from there. That sound good to everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So the first issue is provide pre-built Node.js images or cache, number 39672. I know that Tierney's been working on that a little bit. He's not here, so I'm just looking. I know there's an issue in the admin repo, and I'm looking to find that. Right, so that's this issue right here, number 641 in the admin repo, which is move BNB devm to Node.js dev container. I think basically that one is ready to move forward in terms of we just need Tierney to make one of us an owner that can move it over, and we'll go ahead and do that. So let me just take those notes here. In That's the one thing I can't remember if I checked, like licenses and all that kind of stuff were there, but that's the only other thing we need to sort of double check. It's that BNB Tierney's handle, right?
Yeah, it's BNB.
Okay, good. So yeah, actually, let me take a quick look there. We just have to make sure we've got the right licenses and all that kind of stuff in the repo itself. Yeah, and I see a license, I see code of conduct, so that's good. Okay, those are the two most important. So I think we basically have the next steps set on that one, which is good. Any other discussion on that one before we move on? Okay, if not, so the next two are really, they were things we tagged for the deep dives. I think it'd be best to go back to chatting maybe about the summit. So let me find 10. We have our meeting minutes from the summit. I can kind of share that. So we had great attendance at the summit. We went through types and executable applications. And just let's look at some of the sort of next steps. So I tried to push forward some of the issues. So on the starting the discussion on adopting the Electron style guide, there's actually there was a discussion issue open, so we could go take a look there. Node. There wasn't a lot of discussion in it, but that was, a little bit of discussion tried to get with the collaborators. Tierney did open a PR, which was this PR to PR in the Electron style guide. Probably we didn't really think about the fact that, like, I was thinking style in terms of structure, which I didn't think we had too much coverage of. Of course, we already have a style guide in Node.js project in terms of like wording and sort of things like that. Not so much structural, but like in terms of content. So we didn't. Probably what we should have done is instead of PRing in the style guide, is we should have extracted the structural parts we need for parsing and put those into the style guide that we already have. So that's sort of what's come out of the discussion a little bit there in terms of, you know, the getting these changes in, and really, I think in my mind, that's the next step, is to probably close this PR and, you know, come up with one that tries to PR in just the changes we need for the structural part of what we talked about into the existing guide, so that there's no confusion that this is trying to replace all that kind of stuff. So I think that's where we are on that front. Let me just take a few notes. Any questions, comments, discussion on that? Going to add that in so we have a few. Okay, my cut and paste didn't work. Why sometimes cut and paste doesn't want to work.
Yeah, I find that too, especially in Google Docs. Sometimes it's really.
It's just like.
Sometimes I have to like right click it and say copy, and that like sort of works.
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah, I think you're right. And then left copy and paste. Okay. Yeah. So Control C.
Oh boy.
Okay. So that's sort of, we've got that discussion. So I think we're working on. We are working on that. I'm just sort of sorry, it's still taking some of the notes here, and I think Tierney's working on that. So if we then go back to, you know, kind of things further explore that, I did spend a little bit of time and had a few discussions with Tierney. So it's, I guess I can do that. So I created a PR, which was like, I looked at it to understand a little bit on parser, Electron, parser. GitHub. Right. Which basically just externalized enough of the configuration options that it could work on one of the docs that that Tierney had converted. And it also added the ability to do things incrementally. So they seem fairly small, although there is another, there was another PR earlier that was larger change, but likely more complete. So, that was a little bit of progress on just looking at the parser to see, can we use it? And I guess it really comes down to, if we're going to convert, can we PR in the changes into the style guide that would let that parser work? Or is it that we're going to have to do something different and maybe then either tweak it or, change it more substantially so we're still sort of working through those two things. If we can adopt the sort of style there, then it seems like, it should be fairly straightforward to adapt it to do what we need. So anyway, some progress on that one. And I think Tierney's been looking at this, but I don't really have an update, so and so I haven't started on the other, but that's just sort of an update on that. In terms of the single executable, actually, maybe, sorry, the one other thing I think I did do was create some issues in our repo. If I go here. Maybe I did not. Maybe I meant to, but didn't. So because I don't see. Oh, wait a sec. Suitable types, next steps. Right. Okay. So yeah. So actually, I opened this issue to start to track some of the work that we're doing, and I probably should put in some more stuff. But anyway, that's and. So that's sort of what I know is up to date, in terms of next steps on that. I haven't had a chance, or I don't know that anybody else has had a look at the other sort of side of things, which was let me get back to there, which was the single binary. In terms of the next steps on that front. It was like reaching out to Anna, writing up an overview of what we discussed, and sort of moving that forward. So I guess on that one, we're maybe looking for a volunteer to sort of pick that up and help move it forward. I think we had a good discussion of what makes sense, but we'd have to figure out if we can actually prioritize and move that forward. Anything else that people think we should talk about from the summit? If not, I think the summit, I don't know what people thought, but I think the summit approach worked pretty well in terms of the deep dive. So I think I'd advocate that we do that in terms of the deep dives versus trying to do them in these meetings themselves. What do people think?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, same here. And I think we discussed that 2 weeks ago quickly, Michael also.
Yeah, right. Okay. So the question would then be, maybe we can spend a little bit of time now to plan for what we think would be the next mini summit, in terms of that's probably our most useful thing to do. So as opposed to these two, I might take these two off the agenda. And so actually I'm gonna click them.
Actually, yeah, for the next summit, I was going to propose to work on documentation at least, because it could be linked also, or at least partially, to the work done last time around Electron documentation, stuff like that. And I think on the issue open, someone mentioned something about the guide, which are not really, let's say, we could be, which can be improved. So do we want to move that into the document, let's say a global title documentation, or maybe, I don't know.
Okay. For next mini. So cover What do people think? That one's a good one to tag for the next mini summit. Yes, no, I guess silence is considered
For
agreement. Yeah, I know. Right. Okay, so let's tag that one and then let's look at the other one. If I look into doc guides, technical priorities. These are what we have. So we have like modern HTTP, suitable type for end user. We covered documentation. We've said we're going to put on WebAssembly, ESM, support for features from latest ECMAScript spec, observability, permissions policy security model, better multi-thread support, and single executable applications. What do Pete, does anything jump out in terms of what people think we should be considering?
HTTP might be a nice one. I imagine we could pull the Indici folks into that and get quite a good turnout.
Right. Yeah, it would be like, do we have it do it in the summit, or should we go to one of their meetings? Or, but yeah, that seems like a good suggestion to me. What do people think? Oops. Okay, well, again, I think I'd agree with Beth, and if there's no objections, that's probably a good one to plan for. I think we should reach out to the Indici team to say, hey, do you think this makes sense, or do you already have this covered? You know, if they're like, sorry, go ahead.
The blurb, that the notes that we had mentioned quick, so maybe we want to reach out to someone like James as well.
Yep. Yes, definitely a good idea.
I think we also had some example. I think James did some stuff also with a web server framework. I don't remember the name of the working group, like 6 months ago, or maybe a bit more. So we should also see. I think this group is pretty much over, but I think we also have some example or feedback from James on multiple issue and maybe PR.
Right. Okay. So I think we could send a note or something to, I guess, the Indici team. I don't know if there's actually maybe we should open an issue in the Indici repo to start that discussion.
They have a Slack channel too, if that
Okay.
is another opportunity. In the OpenJS thing.
Any volunteers to reach out to them to see what they think or start that conversation?
I certainly could.
Okay.
What's the first point that you have there? Michael would be the next to cover, next two to cover.
What would be?
Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Got it.
Okay, so if you want to reach out and, you know, sort of just point us to where this conversation happens, then we can all get involved there.
Okay. That would be with Undici.
Yeah, I think it's like them, and then maybe just James too. We want to say like, hey, we're thinking that this would be the next deep dive, you know, the next deep dive in the mini summit. you think that makes sense? Anybody else we should be like trying to invite and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And, you know, for the, you know, good to give the context of like, hey, this is what the team's doing. We identified this as one of the priorities for success. We want to sort of get on top of like, what does the project need or not need to do? Like maybe the project's doing everything it needs to do, right? But sort of capture at this level, what is it we should be doing, and see if we can support that happening. The question then might be, so we got two ones, is like, when do we think that would make sense?
When to do the summit?
Yeah. I'm thinking like January kind of time frame.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You know.
Yeah, I think the end of January could be great.
Yeah.
So like the 27th, say Thursday the 27th.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. So from like 10 to 2, although that does overlap with the TSC meeting.
Are we not reviewing the times in the TSC? Has that happened yet?
We are.
Yeah.
That might change. Yeah, and maybe that's fine. Sometimes from 10 to 2. Because I think that seemed to work okay. I think that makes sense. And let's see. I think it's probably like, it doesn't make sense to do too much until like January. Like we could start to reach out to see if people make sense and stuff like that. But beyond that, in terms of like creating the issues and all that, for visibility, I think I'd wait till January to do that at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I will just link and add the link into the document from the talk James did for the web framework group about HTTP3 and Quick.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I think that's kind of our next step. You know, there's working away at our next steps for the ones we've already looked at. You know, and if people do have time, if they could pick up any of those sort of next steps from the last mini summit, that would be great. You know, we've got a few in play, but there's still a few others that could definitely be picked up. Anything else we should talk about this week?
Do we maintain the meeting in 2 weeks, because it will be the 22? I don't know if some people won't be already into Christmas or stuff like that.
I'd suggest we cancel it. What do people think?
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to delete it from the calendar. And that means our next one will be January 5th. Yeah, okay, that does make sense for sure. Okay, anything else? If not, thanks for everybody's time, and we will get together in the new year and hopefully keep moving things forward. Thanks for everybody's time.
Cool. Thanks.
Bye.
Cheers.